Thanks for joining us on Over My Dead Body, the podcast hosted by Nicola Reeder and Carl Tate that aims to bust those myths about all things funerals and answer the questions you never dared ask. So stick in your earbuds, listen, and then send us your questions for the things we still haven't answered for you. Happy listening. So on this week's episode of Over My Dead Body, we are delighted to have with us a guest who I follow quite closely on social media. I am one of your stalkers, and I'm a big fan of your podcast. I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. So Katie Costello, welcome to the show.
Brilliant, thank you. Someone said to me the other day that they've been stalking me, and I was like, I'm sure most people would be offended, but I'll take it as a compliment. I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I equally take stalking as a compliment. So please do more of it of me and Carl. And so Katie, you can articulate much better than I can what you do, and it's such a range. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, your background.
Gosh, I will try and keep it simple. So all of my work is based around end of life care. My business, if you like, is end of life support services. And within that includes my kind of three main roles, one of which is a soul midwife. So a soul midwife is an end-of-life companion. Some people may have heard of a death doula, where essentially those people that walk alongside people as they die. My other role is as a funeral celebrant, which after being with the dying and helping people plan their funerals, planning their deaths, I was involved in a lot of funerals. People would ask me to read eulogies or poems or kind of get involved. So actually it made sense for me within my work and my heart to kind of expand that offering. So I now do only funerals. I don't do weddings. I'd rather deal with death and dying than brides any day of the week. And then from also my years of doing that, so I've been with the dying now for nearly 13 years. And what I recognised through all of my years with various different healthcare roles, I used to work in palliative care in the community, domiciliary care. I've worked in nursing homes alongside district nurses. I spent 8 years at my local hospice. So in all of those roles, really understanding death care and community care, I also saw the lack of training. There is nothing out there that actually trains people on death and dying. You get a couple of clinical bits of e-learning where it's a few tick boxes. You've got some quite clinical formal learning, but there's nothing really that prepares people for the humanness of death, for what dying looks like, what the human body goes through. So with all of my learning and the fact that I've sat with probably hundreds, if not maybe thousands of people now that have died, I created that training, which was formally accredited with the CPD a couple of years ago. And now a big part of my work is to share that far and wide. And I deliver that to care homes, care agencies. I was recently with some complex care nurses, many other celebrants, funeral directors, all sorts, anybody that wants to delve into the world a little bit more to help themselves grow personally as well as professionally. So I think that kind of covers everything. Oh, and obviously the podcast. And the podcast and the training is under my brand Dying for a Cuppa, which kind of came many years ago from a death cafe pre-COVID. Took it online because of COVID, and that has expanded now because everyone did actually want to talk. People found the information interesting that was being shared. They realised that there was this weird woman that was able to waffle on about it quite easily, and it kind of created a safe space. So I've kind of rolled with that, and the Dying for a Cuppa is the masterclass, is the education. I've got the podcast, and I've also got another string. With that is my professionals, where I offer coaching and mentoring for people that also want to try and forge a path in this weird and wonderful world.
Katie, do you ever sleep or eat or get a chance to enjoy yourself?
Someone said that to me the other day. I have to confess, I do have some help around the house. My very lovely goddaughter comes and helps me with the housework. That helps massively. But do you know what? I am always busy. And I do get a chance to rest. I do have to manage my own self-care, my boundaries, personally and professionally. But because what I do, none of it feels like work. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but I never think, oh gosh, I've got to go and do this today, or oh, that feels such an effort. I think because I genuinely love what I do. I've always loved people. I love talking. So it really never feels like a job. So I never really feel like, oh gosh, I'm so busy, because I constantly feel like I'm just so blessed to be doing what I love and to have found my calling, as cheesy as that might sound to some.
It sounds gorgeous. It sounds absolutely lovely. And I don't think you work in this industry without having some kind of vocation to want to help. And, you know, we can't make it hurt any less for people, but all of us collectively can hopefully make it easier for people, which is kind of one of the topics we really wanted to explore. So your podcasts have the whole range of titles from, I think there's one about mouth care at end of life. There's one about my friend Tess, I think. And so lots and lots of different titles. But the one that really gripped me was, why is it important to talk about death, dying and funerals, which, Carl, is one of the reasons we kind of started this podcast in the first place. It is, yeah, just to give people that opportunity to talk about it and just make it less of a taboo subject. It's the only thing that will get, it's guaranteed in life, isn't it? That it's going to happen. And no one ever talks about it. So, you know, this is why we need to get the word out there, really, just spread the word. Absolutely. So, Katie, tell us why you think that's really important to have that conversation.
Oh, gosh, so important. I think from my perspective, being the person that walks alongside people and sees the impact of having the conversations versus not having the conversations, I also feel equally passionate about getting people to talk. Because to not talk about it is totally understandable, because it's almost within our DNA. Our brains protect us from pain. You know, we walk away from scary situations. We don't walk near the edge of something because we know we might fall off. You know, it's instinctive to look after ourselves and protect ourselves. And I think because we've got so bad at death in modern day British society, that we see it as this something that needs to be fixed or conquered, or it's so scary and the doctors will do it, that we as human beings almost remove ourselves from any situation that might involve something scary or emotive, like talking about death, because we think we're protecting ourselves. But gosh, if there's one thing I can get across to people today, is that not talking does not protect you, it makes it worse. Because if you talk and there is conversations about maybe where you want to be for your death, how you feel about certain things about your life, about medical care, or about your family or your situation, or everything that matters to you about your dying time, to talk about that is not only empowering for you, but it's a gift to everybody around you. And I often use that kind of analogy to try and get it through to people that it is genuinely a gift. It's a good thing to share your thoughts, feelings, even if they are challenging, even if it is emotive. Because to not talk about it is even more challenging and emotive after the fact. If we can share how we feel, if we can connect to the people around us, it does mean that people can have a more supported, potentially calm death. And for the people that are with that person that's dying, if they know what that person's wishes are, especially then as well with funerals, if they know that after that person's gone, they understand that they want to be cremated, that they only want Bob Marley music, that they want a wicker coffin, that they really love the idea of having an afternoon service so they can have afternoon tea afterwards. Whatever it is, those people left behind have that gift of peace and knowledge. So yes, to discuss a funeral might be really upsetting, say between a family, say it's a partnership and one partner is dying and the other one doesn't want to talk about it because they can't bear to think about not having them, and the person that's dying doesn't want to talk about it because they don't want to upset their partner. That's already upsetting. But this is what I say to people, to have the conversation. If that partnership, if they can share what they want for their death, what they want for their funeral, the other person can hear it, whether they want to or not, they will feel the benefits of that conversation after they've gone. They will then appreciate the gift, and they will be so glad that they put themselves through that emotion, when they can then see that they've saved themselves the extra emotion of the pain, the regret, the questions, when they can't ask them anymore to that person because they're not here.
I would agree with absolutely everything that you've said there, because that's the perfect scenario of what people should be doing, and it should be normalized. It should be part of life. You're born and you're going to die. It's as simple as. And everything, but talking about it really just, we have so many scenarios with funeral directors, with funeral planning, where someone's pre-planned their funeral, and some of the family are like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that Mum's favourite track was this. And it's like, well, it's on here. It's written on the paper. So this is what we're having. And I think that's quite a nice thing to do as well. And it unites families as well. If they know what they're doing, it just makes that whole grieving process so much easier, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I often say to people, when they say that they're scared or they don't want to have this conversation because they know it's going to be upsetting, and this is part of what I discussed in my training as well with the masterclass, is that when people talk about fear, is to really drill down, what is it you're scared of? Because more often than not, people can identify, well, actually, I'm not scared of death because maybe I have a faith, maybe I have a particular belief system, maybe I'll believe I'll be with God, I'll be with the angels, there'll be nothing, whatever it might be. But then people then can think about, actually, am I scared about dying? What might that look like? You know, how might I feel? But it's different to the death. But one thing that I also will, the reason I'll ask people to explore this if they're able, is because one common thing is maybe they're not scared of death or of dying, but they're scared of their grief. They're scared of the fact that they know this is going to be incredibly painful. But also, even if you have a lovely family dynamic where everybody gets on, you know the grief is still there. And in fact, some people would argue the grief is more palpable because you have a close relationship. But also the grief can be really challenging if you don't have a good relationship. So to talk about it, even in the really trickiest of circumstances, is equally, if not more so powerful when you don't have that free-flowing conversation with a family, when you don't have that good dynamic or that easy communication channel. So for the good, the bad, or the ugly, these conversations are needed for death, for funerals, good relationship or not. You know, just because everyone's family, I often say, you know, just remember that not everybody is a loved one. But even so, even more so, if they're not a loved one, the communication needs to be clearer, because also what you can then do is make sure that everybody knows what page they're on, whether they like it or not. There's no arguing about, well, I think mum wants to be cremated. No, she told me she wanted to be buried 10 years ago. Yeah, but hold on, wait, she told me how she wanted her ashes here. So that, if you've expressed your wishes, you can also minimise and support the family in whatever way that family looks. So again, we always think, oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. It's the grief that we find challenging, but we can support that by putting these plans in place or having the conversations. And I always say to people, if they don't want to have a full-blown plan or a full-blown conversation, at least write 3 things down on a Post-it note, because that Post-it note will be gold. After the fact, and then that is something that they can bring to you guys, or, you know, to you, Carl, as a funeral director, to go, look, I've got no idea what mum wanted, nobody talked about it, but she has written these things on a Post-it note. And to you as well as a professional goes, oh, thank goodness, you've got somewhere to start. And that's the hardest thing, like you said, people come to you and don't have a clue. What do I do? I've never done this before. Who's supposed to do what? What are my options? If you go with that Post-it note to you, you've got somewhere to kind of guide them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you talked there, Katie, about kind of when you are walking beside people and they can plan their own funerals, and, you know, that's a really invaluable time. But if somebody dies really suddenly, dies young, you are then left in shock as well as grief. And that shock of that just completely numbs you in terms of, well, actually, I never thought I'd be having to do this. So what does my loved one want? Just so, as you say, just having those few bits of information written down, particularly in those circumstances, is such a help.
And when, do you know, we had this conversation when I did a masterclass literally a few days ago, and somebody said, you know, all the conversations we were talking about was, and in the training we talk about what death looks like, literally what we see, how our bodies change. So then somebody said quite rightly, but if somebody dies suddenly, whether it be a suicide, whether it be a tragic accident, whether it be a cardiac event, when somebody leaves this earth really suddenly, we often have literally nothing to go on. So then somebody said, you know, so when do you plan this stuff? And I was like, now. Like, there's nothing stopping every one of us, touch wood, you know, 3 of us here are healthy and well. I've got my stuff in order. So God forbid, if I do get hit by a bus tomorrow, my son, my family can all go, oh, actually, hold on. Yeah, mum, I knew what mum wanted. There's no reason why we shouldn't have something, that Post-it note, if nothing else, tucked in a drawer now. And this is, I think also, you know, when I say to people about talking about death, I'm not asking people to sit and stay in this morbid headspace for hours or days on end. I'm talking about a few thoughts or a conversation over dinner. I'm talking about reflecting over what maybe they saw in a film last night that they were horrified by, or that they really like the idea of. And actually those little snippets of thoughts and connection you have with yourself and your people, like, that's where the gifts come in later on. And when you do that, and you know that you've expressed yourself, or you know you've heard something from somebody in your family and go, oh gosh, I didn't expect that actually my dad would want no Elvis. He loves Elvis, but actually he wants classical music. Like, to have that bit of information and to know all that stuff, again, is so valuable when, not if, when something happens, whether it's expected or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That you know the conversations, that's all it's about, because you're in a different mindset. So the mood in the room is completely different. So the mood would be different if one of us wasn't here. We'd be thinking, "Oh God, no!" And your whole mind just changes, doesn't it? So it's more of a positive, and it's sometimes it's an easy conversation to have. I think. I mean, I know other families, other people do struggle, but it's more of a sometimes it can be a bit more light-hearted than it's like this doom and gloom, and your whole mindset changes, doesn't it?
And that's, I think, is a really key word there, is mindset. Like I said, we if I say to somebody, talk about it, and they think, oh gosh, it's going to be challenging, it suddenly turns into this sad side head tilt conversation of, why do we assume it's going to be that way? It might be uplifting, it might be inspiring, and actually, a lot of the time, having this conversation about your wishes or death, or hearing people's perspectives about faith or whatever it might be, or grief even, can actually help us live a more enriching life, where we can really understand how we feel, how our people feel, when we know that actually, so if you do get hit by a bus tomorrow, actually, I know exactly what I'd do, because you said you want this, and this made you laugh, and I know you don't want that because that really upset you when you saw it on EastEnders last week. Great, we'll crack on living now. Yeah. You don't have to sit in that space. But it is that's what I say about the analogy of a gift. You know, you give each other in your tribe, in your village, that gift of knowing, the gift of peace, the gift of connection, of understanding, of love. And then you just carry on living your life. Yeah. So it doesn't need to be that morbid, challenging thing. It might be emotive in the moment, because death and grief is, but it doesn't mean you have to stay there. And it's the mindset shift of realizing that actually you can have the conversation with the tears and continue living with joy afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And at no point has that conversation been more relevant. I'm going to drop the phrase again, but with direct cremations, because we are seeing so many families where that is just a complete shock to them, and they're kind of dealing with the grief, dealing with loss, dealing with thinking they were going to get a chance to say goodbye at a funeral, and then finding out that their loved one, their person, has booked a direct cremation, and that's it. They'll not see them again. They'll not until they get some ashes back. And that particularly, I think, is the conversation to have, so that you're not shocking your family if that's your decision.
Absolutely. And I think not only does it support the shock, but I think we also need to be mindful of our language when we're having the conversations, that if we say, excuse me, yes, I want a direct cremation, follow it up with, and you can gather in the pub afterwards if you want to. Because so many people will say, oh, my mum chose direct cremation, but she never said anything else. So it's like we need to give our people permission to go, yes, I want a direct cremation, and however, but you can also do something if you feel you want to. So again, I like, it just needs to be more of a conversation around the dinner table to really what direct cremation means to people. So I had a situation very recently where the gentleman died, the family chose direct cremation. Somebody in that gentleman's life was really anti that idea, because they were like, how's that going to work? I need to do something. They were very good friends. We then had a gathering in a pub where this person was very well known. And the friend was like, that's not going to work. I don't get it. Because in his head, understandably so, it should have been a crematorium. There should be a chapel. There should be this. There should be that. And he felt that's what he needed. So he was very kind of resistant to this idea of this gathering in the pub. And as we very well know, when these things happen, often people reflect and go, oh my goodness, actually, how wonderful was that? And thankfully, that's exactly what he did. But it's that, he almost wished he could have got there sooner, because he felt he missed out that valuable time of contributing and engaging in the process, because he just couldn't get his head around it, because they'd never had the conversation. So again, I think when people realise that direct cremation means so much more than just, and I use air quotes, disposal of a physical body, you can still have gatherings and ritual and ceremony. You can still make everything personalised, with or without religion, with or without a funeral director input, with or without chapels and formal stuff, however people want to do it. But we need to let our people know that is also still an option.
Yeah, and that direct cremation is one element of a whole ritual of saying farewell to your loved one that looks like however you want to it to look like. But one of the phrases that you used in the podcast that I thought was really interesting was, if you have the conversation, you're facing up to the fear and you have the power back in terms of the fear of that conversation. And I thought that was a really great way of looking at it, because I think a lot of people are scared about tempting fate. We hear this phrase, if I talk about it, then it will happen. Well, you talk about sex, you don't get pregnant. That's kind of the same sort of thing. And I think that was a really valid point you made.
And I think that also comes from seeing people as they die. So much changes for us when we die. So many things get taken out of our control. So our physical aspects, our mobility, our energy, continence, what we can and can't do, what we can and can't eat, the medication, doctor's appointments, like our lives become very different if we receive a diagnosis. And there's so many things that happen out of our control. And that's really hard. You don't have to be a control freak, as it were, or somebody that's really, really in charge of everything to feel that change. So by having the conversation, that is something that you get to keep hold of that autonomy. What matters to you, what's important to you, your independence, your dignity, your pride, all of those things that we all carry in different levels, but that we all carry, they're still yours. So to have that conversation enables that for yourself, which then enables you a different, or maybe another level of self-worth, self-confidence. It supports you as a human being to go, actually, I'm going to take charge of the things I can take charge of. And having the conversations, planning your death and your funeral is a huge part of that. And I can honestly say, with hand on heart, everybody, out of all the many, many people that I've supported over the last, like I said, over 12 years, everybody that has planned their death and their funeral, it's been empowering. It has been an enriching process. I don't want to say positive, because I think positive the word's a little bit cheesy, but it has had so many benefits to them and the people around them. And there's Dr. Catherine Mannix. I like to name drop her. She's a friend. It's weird who we find name dropping in celebrities in our world, but she's brilliant.
Brilliant.
She's written the book Fab, With the End in Mind and Listen. But she always says, again, having these conversations, like the worst is already happening, like death is safe. So, why we steer away from these things when it's going to happen? Why, when, like I said, all of that control is getting taken away, you do have control. You can plan the end of your life. Why wouldn't we, when it is the most natural thing that we're going to go through? We've forgotten that it's a given. So,
you are exactly right with that. And it is that planning. You plan everything in your life. You plan, when you leave school, you have all these hopes and dreams and things, and then why not just plan the final hurrah, and it's not about, and for me also, yes, you can pay for it, but you also, it's just that conversation and putting something onto paper, as you say. You don't have to go and pay for it. You can just say, look, this is a rough idea of what I want, and that's it. So yes, of course, if you want to part with the cash and go into the funeral planning side of things, then that's fine. But it is just the conversation, isn't it? And even as bizarre as it is, we do get people ring up and just say, look, I'm not dying, but I just want to know a little bit more. It's like, right, fine. It doesn't cost for a funeral director or a celebrant to come round and have a chat for half an hour. And that's it sort of opens the doors of funeral. Like, we open our doors to anybody. And if they want to come in and just have a conversation about it, we can tell them, we can go into as much detail as they really want, or as little. We don't have to tell them everything, but, and it just puts people's mind at ease, I think.
Absolutely. And I think what I also encourage people to do with that is, if they want to have the conversation, let people know that they can shop around for the right funeral director and or celebrant that will do that. So if you're somebody that uses humour, or that you don't necessarily want a traditional funeral, if you go into what might be seen as an old school funeral directors that do things a certain way, the conversation's probably not going to be as supportive as you would need it to be. So go to a funeral director down the road, have a chat with somebody online, look on Instagram. Modern day means that somebody can find a funeral director and or celebrant that they feel that they go, oh, I quite like them. They seem really nice. I like the photo they shared of that service. That coffin was unique. To know that people can Google and shop for this stuff, I think is really important, because it's the same with anything in life, human being to human being. We like some people, we don't others. And it's, to have the conversation with somebody, you want to be talking to somebody that you feel that you connect with or you can trust. So I think it's, funeral directors, I think any funeral director worth their salt, and hopefully many would do that, just to have the conversation, to put the information out there. Because ultimately, if that person comes back to you, yes, it's not just beneficial from a business perspective, but you can do right by a person's wishes. And that's fundamentally what all of us in this space want to do. We want to do right by people.
And it's funny, we're only putting the audio of this call out, not the video. But as Katie was talking there, Carl and I were sitting there like nodding dogs, just going, yes, shop around, make sure you get the right people.
Yeah, I mean, as a funeral director, and I always, I'm of course I would always say come to us because we're the best. But it's getting that getting the word out that families do have choices. They can talk. It's like when you go and buy a car. You don't just walk into a car showroom and pick the first car you get. You think about it. You take your time. And if you might know a funeral director in another part of the country, and you think, well, he's my mate and I know him. Well, I'm sure they'd travel across country to do it. And it's you've got that whole support network. And as you say, funeral directors should just say, right, yeah, well, this is us. And there's no offence taken. If you don't like the way some funeral directors do, that's fine. You can stop during the arrangements and say, actually, do you know what? This isn't for us. And it's like, right, fine, no problems. If that's how you feel, then we wouldn't want anybody to feel pressured into doing something that they really didn't want to do.
Yeah, and likewise for celebrants, we would always say it's about serving the family getting the best possible result for the service they want on the day. And you absolutely won't offend us. We'd be more upset if we thought you'd progressed with a celebrant that you weren't quite happy with, and that it didn't quite click and it didn't quite feel right. I'd be heartbroken if I felt like a family couldn't tell me that and that they needed somebody else.
Yeah, it's too important. And I think for us in this space, we recognise it's not about our egos needing to be, I'll be the go-to celebrant. Oh, I'll fix it. I'll do it. It'll be okay. It's actually, no, if this doesn't feel right for your farewell, for your person, we need to figure out who does. Because I honestly believe that grief and funerals, or the moment of funeral or ceremony or whatever it is that we might do to honour that person's death, that is life-changing for us. So having the farewell we need, whether it's direct and it's something afterwards, whether it's a drink on the beach, whether it's a full-on creme service, whatever it is, that moment then becomes like our next step forward. And with the right celebrant, with the right funeral director, especially if you've also had the bonus of the conversations and understanding beforehand, that next step you take after that service will literally determine the rest of your journey forward with grief. That's how important I think these moments are. So if you haven't got that gelling with the celebrant, or you're not convinced the funeral director is really able to do what it is you need to do, that step you take forward is already muddied. Your grief is already going to be challenged because you're still going to have that, I didn't sit right. Oh, if only we'd done that, or I wish I'd have asked. Whereas if you've had the right connection with the celebrant and funeral director, you knew what the person wants, you can fulfill their wishes, you've got, whether it's everything from, bells and whistles, literally, or whether it's something a bit more formal and old school, either way, if it is appropriate for your person, when you then move forward, you move forward with that piece. Amidst the grief, it doesn't take the grief away, like we said, but it adds that support to know that actually I did everything I could. So it's almost like a sliding doors moment, that how we move forward with that grief could be making maybe not good choices. Maybe, it's really struggling with our mental health. It changes our lives. Whereas grief can do that anyway, but if it doesn't come with the extra layers and challenges of the unanswered questions, or the regret, or the anger, or the I wish and I should have done, you're walking forward with grief, and it's just grief in its icky form, but it's without the other horrible layers that didn't need to be added. And this is what I wish I could get through to people. I guess that's the message. We need to talk about death because we need to stop those other layers being added. We do have control about those other layers, but we need to do that now. We think we don't want to do it because we think it's going to be harder. It's not. It's going to be harder if we add all the other crap on top of it later on.
I love that way of putting it. That is just such a great way of explaining. So we've had some brilliant conversations there about why it is so important to get talking or get planning what we want for our final farewells. And I've no doubt we've inspired loads of people to actually want to grab the mantle, put their big girl pants on or big boy pants on and start the conversations. But Katie, how do you do that with a family that are going to be more reluctant to start that conversation? What's the practical advice about how to get people talking?
Look, I always get asked this. We do talk a lot about communication in the death education, but I think the reality is, I think this twofold. So there are tactical ways of facilitating a conversation, but I think we also need to bear in mind that sometimes we are actually never going to get through to some people. And so I know that's not going to be very helpful, but I think if we have to understand that we can at least try. And everything I said about the other layers of grief, when you've got these questions and the ickiness, even if you've tried to have the conversation, but you couldn't get through to anybody, you couldn't get through to the person, at least you tried. So it wasn't for want of trying. I think what is harder is the regret of knowing you never even asked the question. I should have spoken to Dad about this. I wish I'd have just asked Mum. So I think the first thing is to recognise that actually, you just need to want to have the conversation yourself. And I think a lot of this work with death and dying and the whole societal community thing of the fact that it's still very taboo, we don't want to talk. My mission is kind of to get through to everybody that actually it's all of our responsibility as human beings to get better at this. All of us, irrelevant of profession, irrelevant of skill set, of age, like as human beings, we need to get better at this. So I think if people want to have the conversation, but they feel that they're faced with people that don't want to go there, I think the first thing is people need to look at themselves about why they feel uncomfortable. What is holding somebody back, whether it be barriers of their own grief, their previous experiences, the expectation of what that person might say. And I think also I'd like to hopefully give people the confidence in actually understanding that don't assume that it is going to be a difficult conversation. So yes, somebody might go, oh gosh, no, I don't want to talk about that. But depending on how you broach it, the time that you broach it, if somebody's in pain, don't try and then have a conversation about their funeral. If somebody is stressed about the football, and they're upset because they're whatever team is wherever in the league, don't pick those moments where somebody can't engage or they're distracted. So, literally pick your moments, but also pick your battles. You're not necessarily going to get through to everybody all the time. And sometimes planting a seed is enough. So, but if you do plant that seed and you're brave enough, because you've looked at why maybe you're finding the conversations difficult, what your expectations are about where this is going to go or how challenging it's going to be brave, ask the question, and people might be surprised then actually when they pick the right moment or somebody does engage when they've asked the question, people will be surprised about actually the response of being given permission to talk. So when, to open it up and say, gosh, did you see EastEnders last night? That funeral, God, that was morbid. I wouldn't want that. What would you want? It doesn't have to be an in your face, let's talk about your death. It can just be taking advantage of those moments in life, telly, in the co-op when you see something on the newspaper, or all those things that pop up in front of us every day. Take advantage of those. And also a lot of people, particularly that are poorly, in my experience, when in conversation they will drop things in. It's whether we choose to hear them. So when somebody, say you've got Aunt Mavis that is talking about life, and she says something about I'm worried about the roses in the garden. I don't want, they're not going to last the winter. Actually, I wouldn't want roses at my funeral. I'd rather have lilies. But I'm worried about the front garden too. It's us as family to go, oh, that's interesting you say that, Aunt Mavis. So you wouldn't want roses, but you have roses. Whereas what happens is we go, oh, okay. Oh, crap, I don't know what to do. So I know it's not always that obvious, but actually there are many moments that we could take as opportunities, but we choose not to because we don't know how to do it. And that's why I say about we all need to get better. So I think we just need to get braver. We all need to get in a different mindset, like we've said a few times, about not only just being able to have the conversation, but try and not assume it's going to go in a certain way. And also the energy we bring to a conversation has a difference. If you come at Aunt Mavis going, right, Aunt Mavis, you're going to die soon and it's going to be sad and I need to talk to your funeral because I need to know how much money you've got. Like totally different to, wow, Aunt Mavis, you mentioned the roses. I saw this thing on telly. Have you thought about that kind of thing? Because I have, and I love lilies, but God, they smell, don't they? They're really overpowering. Totally different conversation. Yeah. But you can still get the same information. So if we come at this with a bit more of an open heart, if we come at this with a little bit more lightness even, I think, Cole, you mentioned that, it doesn't have to be a doom and gloom. There can be joy and humour, and there's so much magic that comes out of these conversations. So if we can get our head around that mindset, change the energy that we're bringing, and people then trust you, people will open up. So, and when those moments and in conversation come up, those little what they call that, little gambits, those little things that people throw into conversation. If we can be a bit more open-hearted and brave enough, when they come up, we can follow on that conversation with them. But also, don't be afraid to get somebody like myself or another celebrant or a funeral director to go, actually, we need to have a conversation, but we don't quite know where to start because we don't know what our options are. Yeah. So actually, my nan has said she wants to talk. I'm scared. Where do I even begin? Could you come in and just bring some leaflets? It could be starting with a tick box, although I don't really like leaflets and questionnaires, I have to say. But at least bringing something of a coffin catalogue, it might be a good way to just start the conversation and then let it go from there. So asking for help to have a conversation, if people do want to engage, is also a really powerful and empowering thing to do.
No, I think it is a good point, obviously, of asking for celebrants or funeral directors to have a chat, because if lots of families have these images of funeral directors being like dark and dreary people, well, really, it's the complete opposite. We open up to anyone, and it's sort of once some families think they say to you, well, Bobby, we were dreading that. We were dreading you coming to see us, but actually we feel all right. And it's that next step on the road of grief, isn't it?
Well, hopefully during the course of that conversation, you have got some really valuable information. We could talk for hours, and I thoroughly recommend, as well as downloading Over My Dead Poddy, heading over to Dying for a Cup, because it is a brilliant podcast. There is so much information on there. So, Katie, where do people find you? How do they get in touch with you if they want to?
Thank you very much for the shout out as well. So the podcast is on Spotify, Amazon and Apple. I am KTC Soul Midwife. So that's my website, ktcsoulmidwife.com. Instagram, Facebook. If you look for Katie Costello Soul Midwife, I normally pop up everywhere. LinkedIn as well. But there's loads of information on my website about all the bits that I do. And there's all the links to everything else from there as well. So
perfect. And I believe you are speaking at this weekend's Lifting the Lid conference.
I am. So I'm on 2 panels. I'm with myself and John Adams from the NAFD. We are on the board of advisors for the White Balloon Funeral Hub. So very excited to be on their panel with some other wonderful people on the Friday. And then I am also part of the doula panel, which I'm very excited about, on the Sunday, which is Sunday afternoon, with, again, some other incredible women doing marvellous things from all over the country. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be involved in that as well.
Brilliant. And we will put all of Katie's information onto the show notes. But if you do want to get in touch with her and can't find her, then just get in touch with myself or Carl, and we will hand you the details for that. But Katie, before we let you go, thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to us this afternoon. It's been really valuable. Any lasting thoughts that you would leave with people before we say farewell?
No, just hopefully, I want people to know, one thing I always say to people, we talk about soul midwives. Obviously, I'm a talker. I'm quite high energy. There are over 1,000 soul midwives all over the world. They're not all like me. So if people think about having a soul midwife or that they would want to connect to somebody, I just think it's worth knowing that there really is an army of us, and there will be someone out there for everybody. So not everybody deals with it like I do, and that's absolutely okay. But there is, people just need to know there's a lot more help and resources. Soul Midwives, End of Life Doula UK, Living Well, Dying Well. There's some amazing organisations that can offer help and resources. So I just want people to know that we are out there, I think is the main message. Because so many people go, oh, I've never heard of one of them. What's that? There's lots of people out there that can help when it comes to end of life conversations, planning, emotional support. We just need to know that it's there and know where to look.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be scared. Don't be on your own. We say it all the time. There is so much comfort in grief, and anticipatory grief is another whole topic that I know you cover that I think is fascinating. So there is just so much help and support out there. So please never, ever feel alone when you are navigating this journey. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Katie. Good luck with everything you're doing. And thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been class.
Thank you for listening. And we really hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this week's episode. Remember that you can get in touch with us anytime to ask a question, offer to be a guest, or to request that we bust a particular myth. You can get in touch via any of our social accounts, Over My Dead Poddy, on Facebook, Insta, or TikTok. Or you can drop us an email at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com. griefcounsellors.com. Just a reminder that whilst all of us work in the funeral industry, none of us are fully qualified grief counsellors. And therefore, if you've been affected by any of the issues that we've discussed today, we highly recommend that you seek out professional or medical support to help you with those conversations. Should you need any support, please do get in touch and we can hopefully signpost you in the right direction, but we can't offer those services ourselves. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode.